everyone, welcome back to the Hobby Lobby Creative Studio. My name is Sarah. Today I'm going to show you a few really easy ways to finish your seams, and we'll walk you through the whole process. So stick around, you don't want to miss this. I'm going to walk you through just a few different ways of finishing your seams. The reason why we finish seams is for cosmetic reasons, to give our edges a nice, clean, finished look, but also they have a functional reason too. We want to finish our seams so that the edges don't fray and our garment or whatever project that we're working on doesn't unravel and fall apart. So the first method I'm going to show you is really, really easy and simple. And you do this method with your pinking shears. So right here I have a couple of pieces of fabric that I've already sewn together with just a basic seam. So you can see we've joined them together. I think it's about a 5/8 inch of a seam. So in this method where you're actually joining pieces of fabric, you want to go ahead and sew your seam first and then cut away the excess fabric with your pinking shears. So what you would do at this point is just take your pinking shears, and you can do it as far away or as close to the stitches as you want. It's really up to you. So I'm going to cut just above the stitches. And just make sure that the serrated edge of your pinking shears lines up as you continue to cut all the way down. Okay, and that's it. That's all you have to do to finish that edge with this method. And what the pinking shears do is they create that serrated edge to prevent your threads from unraveling. So if we're joining two pieces of fabric, that's how we would do it for that method. Now if I just have a single piece of fabric where I want to just maybe clean the edge up or do a finished edge, but I'm not actually joining it to another piece of fabric, what I would do is actually cut my edge first with my pinking shears, which I've already done, and then you're going to press it with your iron to however far over you want to press it. So I think I've pressed over enough to do about 1/4 of an inch of a seam. And then all you do is stitch your seam. Okay, and that's what you end up with. Great way, easy way to finish your edges. Now another method you could do is called a double hem. Double hemming is really simple too. What you're going to do is take your piece of fabric, I just have a piece of scrap fabric here to show you on, and then you're going to go ahead and press it to whatever seam allowance you want to press it to. So I've just pressed it down 1/2 of an inch. This is a really easy equation that you can do for practicing your double hems. So I've pressed it down to 1/2 an inch. And also a good tip is to use something called a seam gauge at this point. This is a seam gauge, and it just looks like a little ruler basically, but it's got this great sliding piece on it. And what it does is it pinpoints the measurement that you want to reference whenever you're pressing. So for example, if I'm trying to press this piece to 1/2 an inch, then I can lay my seam gauge down and just go over all the way across that seam allowance and make sure that every part of it measures at 1/2 an inch. So this is a great tool to pick up. You'll use this a lot whenever you're sewing. So after I fold it over to 1/2 an inch, I'm going to fold it over again so that now I'm folding over 1/4 of an inch. So basically I'm just bringing my edge up to where my first kind of raw edge was. So I'm double folding it basically. Okay, so this is what you would do, and then just take some of your straight pins, and actually I need to flip it around here. and just pin it in place. And make sure that when you're inserting your straight pins that you insert them the correct way so that when your fabric is feeding through the machine, you can take your pins out with the head towards you, pulling away from your needle. So just pin this all the way down and maybe give it one more little press in between pins so that you have a piece that looks like this. So all we're going to do is sew a straight seam all the way down. And make sure when you're taking your pins out that you take them out in time before the needle actually hits your pin, or you're going to cause a world of hurt for your sewing machine. So that's a good habit to get into. And I'm just sewing as closely to the edge that's on the inside of the fabric as possible. Okay, so that's a double hem, a really easy way to finish your edge. It makes a nice, clean, crisp, finished looking edge. So moving on from the double hem, next we have something called a flat felled hem. Now this is seen a lot on denim and jeans, so if you look down at the jeans you're wearing maybe, you might notice on the side of them you have this kind of wide, flat looking seam, and that's called a flat felled seam. It's also used in wovens maybe, or garments that have high areas of stress in them. Flat felled seams are great for those kind of garments as well. So to do a flat felled seam, what you're going to do is, again, join a couple pieces of fabric. I've just joined two pieces of fabric together with a basic 5/8 inch seam. Now another important note to make about flat felled seams is that you're going to actually put the wrong sides together whenever you're making your seam. I know you can't really tell on this fabric, but just note to put the wrong sides together whenever you're making your first seam. Okay, so after you've made your basic seam, next you're going to press your seam to one side. So for example, I've pressed mine to the right, okay, so that I have a clear top and a bottom seam allowance here. So the next thing you want to do is actually cut the bottom seam allowance in half. You're basically just kind of giving it a trim so that there's less fabric in this area. Okay, and then what you're going to do is actually fold the longer piece so that it encloses the shorter piece. So you're going to fold it over like that, and at this point you could give it a little press here if you wanted to, and then fold it over again so that it lays naturally wherever you pressed it the first time. So you can kind of see that it makes this long, wide, flat looking seam here. And then you're going to take your straight pins and pin it into place right along that folded edge, just like that, all the way down, so that you end up with a piece that looks like this. So this is ready to sew at this point, and what you're going to do is just add a straight stitch here all the way down this folded edge. Make sure to backstitch at the end to hold all your threads in. And that is the flat felled seam. So it's pretty easy to do. You can tell we have a nice flat finish here on both sides, and it's not bulky at all. It's a really great way to finish your seam. So the last method that I want to show you today is the zigzag stitch. The zigzag stitch, when using it as a way to finish your edges, is really handy if you don't have a serger, because this is a method similar to serging. And what serging does is something called overlocking. You're literally kind of zigzagging over the edge of your fabric so that you're locking in those fibers so that they don't come unraveled. So really when you're sewing, you're kind of going right on the edge or just past the edge of your fabric and then inside your fabric, so you're locking in those fibers again. So to demonstrate the zigzag stitch, you need to change a couple of settings on your sewing machine first. So I can leave my tension about the same, just right in the middle, but I'm going to change my stitch type to zigzag, of course. And then my stitch length, this is kind of up to you at this point. If you want kind of just a medium-sized zigzag, which is totally fine, and it'll do the job that it needs to do, you can leave your stitch length in the middle if you want to. Or you can do zigzag stitches that are very close together and just turn your length way down. And I'll show you an example of that one in a minute. So right now though, I'm just going to leave my stitch length about at a 1 out of 4. So it's going to be a little bit close together, but not really close together, like I'll show you in a minute. Okay, so to do this stitch, what you want to do first is on the knob on the side of your sewing machine, you need to turn it a couple of times, but not to where it actually goes down into your fabric. And why you want to do this, just turn it back and forth, is to see where it's going within your foot. That way you can gauge where to put your fabric so that the needle will hit just on the edge of your fabric or just past it. Okay, so right now my needle is at the furthermost right point of where it's going to hit my fabric. So I'm in the right spot, in other words. Okay, so lower your presser foot and hold your threads, and we are going to do a back stitch with this one. So after it goes a couple times, just go backwards with your back stitch and just stay right on the edge of your fabric. Okay, make sure your needle's up. Pull out your fabric. Cut your threads off. Now you've got a nice, clean, finished edge with the zigzag stitch. So see, my zigzags are a little bit spaced out, not too close together, and I could even do them bigger if I wanted to. It all just depends on what you pick for your stitch length. So if I'm doing it this way, where I'm just doing it on a single piece of fabric, maybe on the edge of an apron or something, then I would want to do my zigzag stitch first and then my seam after that. Because we don't want our zigzags to show. It's not used as decorative technique or anything for the edge that I want showing. I just want to lock in my fiber so that it doesn't unravel. So I still need to add a seam at this point. So what I would want to do next is actually press this over, and depending on what size seam you're going to do, just make sure you press it over far enough to be able to make that seam. So for example, if I wanted to do a 5/8 of an inch seam, then I need to just make sure, maybe with my seam gauge, that I at least press it far enough over to be able to do that 5/8 of an inch seam here. So I have one that I've already pressed, so you should end up with something that looks like this. You've got your zigzag on the edge and it's already pressed over as far over as you want. So then all you would do is sew your straight stitch all the way down and make sure you change your sewing machine settings back to a straight stitch. Which leads me to a good point actually. If you forget to change your settings and you start doing the wrong stitch, or if you just mess up in general, make sure that you purchase one of these handy dandy seam rippers, because you will use this a ton in your new sewing endeavors. And what it does is, I'll actually just demonstrate on some stitches I've already sewn. It has this really pointy end that is really easy to insert under a stitch. So you feed that under one of your stitches and then continue to push it through until it actually cuts that stitch. So that way you can take stitches out if you need to without really damaging your fabric. So this will be a lifesaver in some instances, and it's really inexpensive, so just go ahead and pick up Seam Ripper. while you're at the store. Okay, so back to our basic straight stitch. And I think I have enough folded over here to do about 1/4 of an inch of a seam. So just make sure that you keep the edge of your fabric lined up to whichever mark of measurement here on your sewing machine that you want to follow. Okay, and there you go. That's what it looks like whenever you fold that edge over, press it, do your zigzag stitch, and then add your basic seam. It gives your edge a nice, clean, finished look. So this is, again, just doing a single piece of fabric, not joining another piece of fabric to it. So let's show you how to do that method now, where you're actually joining 2 pieces of fabric. So I've got, actually, my 2 pieces of fabric already sewn together with the same method that I just showed you. So all I've done is lay the 2 pieces of fabric on top of each other, right sides together, and then added a zigzag to the edge. So now, instead of doing any pressing, we're actually going to just sew the seam straight onto this fabric as far over from the zigzag as you want. So again, if you want to do a 5/8 of an inch seam here, just place the edge of your fabric on 5/8 of an inch and start sewing your seam. All right, cut your threads off. And that is how to do the zigzag stitch when joining 2 pieces of fabric. So now on the inside, on the underside of our garment or our project, we have a really nice, clean, finished edge. Looks great. All right, everybody, well, that was just a few ways to finish your seams. There are many more out there for you to try and check out. So I hope you practice with these, and I hope you've learned something new. Definitely come back and join us again next time, everyone. Bye.